Lupin's on a carnival date with a woman named Claudia. Someone pushes a stone towards them as they take a photo, with only Lupin's handsiness saving him. They also avoid a rigged shooting gallery rifle. Zenigata does not. Not to mention someone cutting under Lupin and nearly causing him to fall in a pool of piranha sharks. This is all likely due to Lupin's latest target, a volcanic island near Sicily that hides a treasure. The volcano's active, only going dormant once every 100 years, and for this reason Jigen and Goemon are against it. They put it to a vote, and Zenigata, claiming to join the gang for this heist, breaks the tie. He and Fujiko are just puppets, however. That said, Jigen and Goemon are working with Claudia to stop Lupin stealing the treasure. Of course, Lupin is listening in on this himself, as is the would-be killer. Zenigata's doing an ID check at the airport, poking holes in Lupin's lie earlier. He thinks he has Lupin, but it turns out to be one of a passenger's wives. Well, okay, he was actually right, but the passenger was in on it. Lupin then deals with Zenigata by slipping laxatives into his coffee. As they arrive, Lupin reminds everyone that they only have half an hour while the volcano is dormant. He doesn't notice a spider on his back until it's too late, however. Claudia identifies it as a native species to the island that keeps people asleep for 24 hours. Jigen and Goemon meet with Claudia's grandfather, who asks them to keep the volcano treasure safe. They're rewarded for their help, but as they leave it's revealed Claudia's working for them. They're a mafia group looking to get the treasure for themselves. Jigen and Goemon return to find Lupin awake. He points out that their wreaths are bugged and tells them to be on their way. They head to the volcano, but Goemon messes with the crane controls to distract Lupin. This causes him to lose his watch, so they lie about the time left and lower him again. This plan backfires as the volcano starts rumbling and they discover the crane's rope has been cut. They head down to call for Lupin, but he managed to slip into a cave. Lupin learns of the deception, but they're surrounded by the mafia. They engage in a shootout, but are pinned down. Jigen apologises for deceiving Lupin, but Claudia calls to the gang. Turns out she's with the FBI, and has the police on the way to bring the mafia family down. The volcano starts erupting and the gang make it to the shore. Claudia tells them to go ahead as she has to see things through. The gang are fired at while they row away, but the police are there to back them up. Lupin's not deterred by missing the window for the treasure either, as he set it up to be blown in their direction. He didn't account for the bullet holes, however, so they're stuck between chasing the treasure and not sinking. Talk about deception upon deception in this episode. Even without that, this is an entertaining one on most fronts. The mafia group were a bit flat as characters, but they serve their purpose as someone to fight the gang for the treasure at least. Certainly have to wonder where you'd buy a parachute that's lava proof too. Lupin set his sights on a massive diamond shipment that's currently being stored in Paris. His source is Fujiko, as is often the case, but this is all for their honeymoon, much to the others' shock. Lupin explains that they plan to have the wedding atop a bed of diamonds in the Swiss Alps. Taking a cue from Series 1 Episode 16, the gang disguises sewer workers to full security. Everything seems too easy as there's no surveillance and the safe isn't even locked. Despite this, Lupin decides to take what's being offered. Lupin meets Fujiko at the airport and loads everything on board. After taking off, Goemon notes that Fujiko's nowhere to be found. They then receive a video message from Fujiko, who sold them out to Zenigata for a valuable ring. It backfires on her, as Zenigata never said he wouldn't arrest her too. After this, he contacts a squad at the Austrian border, who take control of Lupin's plane. It's then redirected to a mountaintop and left there with no fuel. The gang spot a massive police force surrounding the mountain, made up of officers from all over the world. The force presses forward and the gang do what they can. Fujiko contacts Lupin to try and warn him to run, but Zenigata quiets her down again. The gang hold their position but are getting low on ammo. Forced inside thanks to helicopter fire, Lupin looks out for anything that might help, spotting the train line and overhearing an incoming train. Zenigata orders the final step of the plan, blowing the mountain up. As he does so, Lupin fashions together a crossbow and ties a long rope to a harpoon. He fires it at the train and the plane is pulled off the mountain. With the police force out of resources themselves, Zenigata grudgingly lets Fujiko free. Lupin admires his diamond collection, but Goemon points out an incoming tunnel. The diamonds are lost due to the crash damage, but Lupin's at least relieved to be back on solid ground. I think Lupin's a bit too gullible when it comes to Fujiko in this episode, though I do get they needed something to get the story going. Still, despite that, I did enjoy his plan for escaping and fighting off the force. You have to admire Zenigata's tenacity too, bringing an entire battalion of police to catch Lupin. On top of that, it still doesn't work. A pair of men drive to a mansion to set something up. Meanwhile, the gang have ingredients for a meal by Fujiko, revealing that the mansion is theirs. They find Fujiko watching a news report on jewellery owned by Lucrezia Borgia. Jigen warns that they are likely cursed given the Borgia family history, but Lupin decides to at least check things out. The Borgia mansion is surprisingly welcoming, as the gang are welcomed by the youngest family member, Galtan. Galtan reveals he set up the newscast to bring them there for a reason. He wants them to spring his only relative from prison. In payment, he offers either a highly corrosive poison or a set of jewels. Galtan disguises as Zenigata and offers the gang up for prison. They spot their target as they're led to their cell, uncuffing and taking the hidden Zantetsuken from a compartment. Breaking through to the target, she's identified as Lucrezia Borgia. The third, I suppose, though maybe she actually is still alive at 500 years in Lupin's universe. She refuses to leave, though she's surprised at hearing the name Lupin as she's chloroformed and taken to a bed. Jigen loads up the bed with a rocket and they fly out of the cell to the waiting Galtan. As they drive, a helicopter drops caltrops ahead of them. The gang clear them up and discover they're Japanese in origin. Turns out the helicopter was piloted by Fujiko, who airlifts Galtan and Lucrezia away. Jigen stuck a tracker to the bed so they can track them down at least. The police also have a tracker, and Zenigata is charged with bringing Lucrezia back. Fujiko tries and fails to get the secret legacy of the Borgias, warned that Galtan isn't above physical torture. Galtan himself intervenes and disarms Fujiko, leaving her tied up. He then forces Lucrezia to talk with the truth serum tipped needle. The gang, having infiltrated, discover a room filled with various Borgia poisons. Zenigata's also there, so they spray him with one that makes him take on a stereotypically feminine personality in order to keep him out of their way. Lucrezia lets slip that the treasure is in a lighthouse, a lens laced with diamonds. Galtan rushes to it, failing to hear a warning that if it's removed forcefully the lighthouse will explode. The gang arrive and spot Galtan, though he's being followed by Zenigata still under the potion's influence. Galtan grabs the lens with Zenigata trailing him, disabling his rope before Lupin can warn them. Lupin manages to grab the railing and pulls Zenigata away just as the explosives trigger. The lighthouse goes up in a display of fireworks. In revenge for causing all of this, Lupin frees Fujiko with a poison that dissolves her clothes as well as her bindings. Lucrezia heads back to prison with Zenigata, who decides he owes them for once, and she hints that she knew Lupin's father in the past. Relatively quiet episode this time around, explosive ending aside. Second episode in a row where Fujiko's led the gang into trouble too, though she does get some payback for it on the antagonists in the gang's part. That said, kind of funny that things would have likely played out pretty much the same even if the gang hadn't got involved in tracking down Galtan afterwards. The gang hit up 3 separate banks. Lupin manages mostly by dumb luck. He also ends up losing a 10-franc bill as he loads his haul into their van. The police are trailing and shoot the bill just as he grabs it. Hiding in a truck, Goemon warns Fujiko that 10 francs could mean all the difference in Lupin's latest plan. The target is an auction, namely for the South African gold butterfly. Their main competition is the billionaire Maniac, so they're hoping that 10 million minus 10 francs will be enough. Maniac's opening bid is 1 million francs, with only Lupin managing to outbid him. Maniac manages the final figure, however, getting it at 10 million minus 1 francs. Defeated, the gang dump their money with Zenigata. Fujiko tries to charm her way to Maniac, earning a ride on his private plane. He's suspicious of her though and dumps her out, though not before telling her the butterfly is able to sense gold and could potentially lead to a small mountain of it. Lupin is of course to Fujiko's rescue. Arriving in South Africa, the gang overlook the aftermath of Maniac's search for the gold. He's hired a small merc army, which Zenigata infiltrates to track Lupin. Not that he lasts long, as Lupin sprays him with knockout gas and takes his place with the rest of the gang. Maniac's prepared, as the butterfly had a tracker planted on it in hopes of leading them straight to the gold. As they progress, he notes that there seemed to be a small army of butterflies almost watching. In response, he decides to thin out their numbers. The tracker eventually leads to a natural haven, and the gold is indeed there. With no further use for the butterfly, Maniac orders it destroyed. Before they can do so, a small army of butterflies counter. The mercs activate their flamethrowers, but Lupin reveals himself and disarms them. The gang engage in a battle, but get back to a cliffside. Fujiko's on hand, tossing them some weapons. The gang push back and take out Maniac's tank battalion thanks to this. Maniac decides to cut and run, with Lupin not intending to let him. The butterfly lands on his rocket launcher, almost as if to tell them to wait. Turns out the bridge Maniac escapes to is made of butterflies, dissipating and leaving them to fall into the river below. Lupin decides to leave the gold, figuring it wouldn't be right to spoil this area. Fujiko's less charitable, so the butterfly leaves her sinking into a mud pond. Lupin dives in to help and Zenigata charges after him. Thankfully they're all saved, with Jigen piloting the helicopter. They certainly do hammer in that Maniac is ruthless in his pursuit of money in this episode. There's some nice scenery in this one, particularly once we reach the butterfly sanctuary, so props to the art department for that much. Funnily enough, they use the idea of being outbid to kick off the plot of one of the later TV movies too, so more on that when I get to it. Next time, a team operation, a treasure in Pompeii, a mind-swapping plot, and a team of diamond-stealing mice take us up to episode 140. Until then.